The government is set to extend the Bright Line test from 2 to 5 years, which is supposed to make housing more affordable. It also meant to preserve the integrity of the tax system. But property commentator Ashley Church says this move by the government is actually damaging the housing market. And he joins me now to explain why.
G'day, Haley.
G'day, mate. How are you? Welcome, of course, to the show. We'll get there. So how can this Bright Line test be damaging?
Well, it's interesting. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that there was a whole range of things that were introduced, not just by the current government, but by the previous national government, that were designed to primarily do two things: to improve affordability and to reduce competition around house price inflation. And one of those was the Bright Line test. Another one was the Reserve Bank's introduction of those loan-to-value restrictions. You could throw the foreign buyers ban in there. They're now talking about ring-fencing of tax losses. All of those things which are designed apparently to actually reduce house price inflation. The point I'm making is that if you buy into the concept of the property cycle, and not everybody does, then what the market's done over the last couple of years is exactly what you would predict with the property cycle that we've got 40 years of history on, and absolutely nothing to do with these measures over the last 2 or 3 years, despite the fact that both the government and the Reserve Bank have taken credit for that slowdown in house prices.
Well, of course. I mean, but it does look like when you introduce these measures and then the housing market slows down, it looks like one might come after the other.
Except, and I'll give you a really good little anecdote that will demonstrate that's not necessarily true. So you would accept, I think, that the Auckland house market has flattened off over the last 18 or so months.
I would accept that, yes.
And you would probably also accept that the rest of the country hasn't yet flattened off, but is coming down now. So if what you would expect is if you introduced a policy that was designed to do the things that the government indicated it was supposed to do, you would expect that to happen instantly right across the country. It wouldn't happen. So, for example, if you introduce excise taxes on tobacco or alcohol, you don't get changes in behaviour in Auckland and then 18 months later the rest of the country. It hits the whole country at once. So the fact that it actually is happening slowly is absolutely indicative of the property cycle. It says Auckland comes in earlier, so goes out earlier, and doesn't look anything like what you would expect as a result of those policies if they were actually the result of the things that have been introduced by the Reserve Bank and the government.
So if that's true, they may have an effect down the line, though. When the property cycle starts ramping back up, maybe these measures will help it sort of take a more steady approach.
Look, I don't believe that, but let me answer that in another way by saying that it's very easy for me to sit here and say, look, there's a property cycle, it goes in basically 10-year cycles, it's going to do these things, you don't need to do anything. It's very easy for me to say that. It would be a brave government that said, you know what, Ashley says we don't need to do anything, so we won't, and basically didn't. So they're between a rock and a hard place. Sure. I get that.
There's more first-home buyers in the market. This is what we're hearing in the headlines at the moment, that there are more first-home buyers in the market, especially in Auckland. So surely this is more proof that maybe something's worked.
No, just the opposite. It's actually less first-home buyers. First-home buyers as a proportion of the total market have been the biggest buyer group everywhere outside Auckland since 2013. And they are still the largest group. In fact, at the moment, according to Velocity, I think they're sitting at around 29% of the total market. But the total number of house sales has actually reduced. So it was 40,000 in 2016 and they made up about 24% of that. They're now 27 or 28% of that, but it's only of 32,000 sales.
So that may suggest that we've gotten rid of the speculators.
Right, so we talk about speculators. So the problem I've got with this whole issue around speculators is that the government's definition of speculators, and indeed the previous national government's definition of speculators, was completely wrong. So a speculator is a very clearly defined thing. Speculator comes into the market, therefore maybe 6 months. At their very best, they do the property up in that process and sell it. At their worst, they buy a property, wait for house price inflation and sell it back into the market. They're never there for longer than about 6 months. So extending the Bright Line test from 2 years to 5 years is ludicrous. That's not going to hit speculators. It's going to hit property.
Is it going to hit mum and dad speculators?
Yes, well, they're not speculators. So and I'm not just saying that, I'm not being pedantic. They're two completely different things. Speculators make their money by selling property back into the market. That's how they make their profit, by making a profit on the sale of the property. Property investors provide a service. They're providing a rental property into the market, which actually provides a home over people's head. It's a completely different form of business. They're not speculators.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
You've just opened up a can of worms. We could talk for all morning about this, but we can't, unfortunately.
No problem at all.
Thank you very much
for
coming
Haley.
in and confusing me even more.
No worries. I'll see you again next time.
Did you get that?
Coming, I sort of vaguely did. I see. Yeah, this is interesting, isn't it? Ashley's writing for one.
That Bright Line test is coming in between what a speculator and an investor might.
Absolutely.
So what's the point? Maybe you should extend it to 10 years, Ashley.
Well, that's an argument for another day. So.
Ashley's writing is for oneroof.co.nz
Yes,
if you want to read more from Ashley. A really excellent property commentator who we're very grateful to have on the show. Thanks,
Thank you, John.
Ashley.